The letter arrived in a plain, unmarked envelope, no return address, just a single sheet of paper folded inside. Saint Elora Hospital, Asheville, Massachusetts. Find room 413. That was it. No sender, no instruction, no explanation. Ethan Brooks turned the paper over and over between his fingers, frowning. The handwriting was messy, urgent, as if whoever wrote it was in a hurry or afraid. He should have thrown it away. Instead, 2 days later, he was barreling up the I-95 in his battered Jeep Cherokee, camera gear rattling in the back seat, half a tank of gas, and a feeling he couldn't shake. Something was waiting for him. Ethan had always had a nose for ghost stories. He wasn't some thrill-chasing YouTuber looking for cheap jump scares. He wasn't one of those wannabe ghost hunters waving EMF meters around abandoned houses. No, Ethan hunted the real stories, the ones towns buried and refused to speak of, the ones that stayed long after the blood dried. He told himself it was about the truth, about giving voices to the forgotten. But deep down, he knew it was about something else. Guilt. A gnawing guilt he could never name, but carried with him like a second skin. Asheville was smaller than he expected. A scattering of faded brick buildings, a diner that had probably looked the same since 1953, a post office, a gas station, and beyond it, wrapped in creeping fog like a corpse in a shroud, Saint Elora Hospital. He parked at the edge of the tree line and killed the engine. The hospital loomed in the distance, a decaying hulk of red brick and broken glass, 4 stories high, windows gaping like empty eyes. Rusted fire escapes clung to the walls, sagging dangerously. The locals said Saint Elora burned in '72. Official calls, faulty wiring. Unofficial calls, nobody wanted to talk about it. They whispered about screams, heard even after the last embers died. About lights flickering in windows that had no electricity. About children laughing in the woods at night. Ethan shouldered his backpack and crossed the dead field, heart thudding harder with every step. By the time he reached the main entrance, the sky had bruised purple and the fog was rolling in thicker, wrapping around his ankles, his wrists like unseen hands. The door groaned open with a shove. He stepped inside, and the whispers began. The first thing Ethan noticed was the smell. Mold, burnt wood, something still underneath, like rotting flowers. The second thing was the cold. Not the crisp chill of October air, no. This was different. This was the cold that lived in places forgotten by the world. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut a thin path through the gloom, revealing sagging ceilings, broken tile floors, graffiti smeared across cracked walls. Someone had sprayed "Get Out" in black letters across the lobby. Ethan stepped carefully, boots crunching over shattered glass. Somewhere deep in the hospital, a door creaked. The whispering returned softer this time, like breath against his ear. Not yet, it seemed to say. He tightened the strap of his backpack, squared his shoulders, and moved deeper. The main hallway was a tomb. Peeling paint hung from the walls like dead skin. Rusting wheelchairs sat abandoned in corners. An old gurney blocked the hall, its mattress burned, the frame melted and warped. Ethan passed an empty nurse's station. The windows behind it were so filthy they barely let in any light. He caught his reflection in the cracked glass bale, hollow-eyed, gaunt. "You look like a ghost already," he thought grimly. Something clattered behind him. He spun around, flashlight jerking. Nothing. Just the echo of his own breathing, too loud in the suffocating silence. But when he turned back, he saw it. A small, soot-stained handprint smudged on the counter. Fresh. The stairwell smelled worse. The scent of wet ash and rusted blood seemed to ooze from the walls themselves. Ethan climbed carefully, feeling each step sag under his weight. The second floor was worse than the first. Darker, colder. The whispers grew louder up here like a choir tuning for some terrible song. Doors lined the hallway on both sides patient rooms, judging by the faded numbers. Some were open, others shut tight. From behind one, Ethan heard faint sobbing. From another, childish giggling. He didn't stop to check either. At the end of the hall, a strange door stood alone. Different from the others, newer, somehow less decayed. Its number plate was missing. Ethan felt it before he saw it. A pull deep in his gut, like gravity gone wrong. This door was important. He reached for the handle, but the air grew so cold his breath fogged instantly, and a voice barely audible whispered, "Not yet." The handle burned under his touch, and Ethan jerked his hand away. He stepped back, heart hammering against his ribs. Somewhere far off, a lullaby floated through the halls. Soft, broken. He recognized it without knowing why. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." He backed away from the door, breathing hard. He needed to find room 413. He just didn't know yet. It was already finding him. Ethan moved deeper into the second floor, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The hallways twisted unnaturally, longer than they should be, turning in on themselves like a maze designed by something that didn't understand human architecture, didn't care. Each step felt heavier. The hospital groaned and sighed as if it were breathing with him. He passed open doors, their rooms yawning black and empty. Some still had beds bolted to the floor. Others contained only scattered medical charts, rusted IV stands, and chairs knocked over long ago. And every so often, Ethan would catch it. Out of the corner of his eye, a flicker of white, like a child darting just beyond the beam of his flashlight. Stay calm, he told himself. He'd been in hundreds of places like this. Seen worse, heard worse. It was just fear playing tricks on him. Down one hallway, he found a broken wheelchair lying on its side. The wheels creaked softly, though there was no wind. When he stepped closer, the chair jerked just a twitch, like a dying insect. Ethan froze. A shadow slithered across the far end of the hall, quick and fluid, vanishing before he could lift his light. He swallowed hard. That wasn't the wind. He found a cluster of old patient files scattered across the floor. Kneeling down, he sifted through them. Daniel Morton, age 7, third-degree burns, deceased. Susan Rivera, age 9, respiratory failure, deceased. Thomas Lee, age 5, experimental treatment complications, deceased. Each file was tagged confidential, each marked with the same signature at the bottom, Dr. Jonathan Brooks. His father. The realization twisted Ethan's gut. He dropped the files and stumbled back, heart pounding. From down the hall, he heard a new sound. Laughter. High-pitched, childish, but hollow. Wrong. It echoed strangely, bouncing off the walls as if there were dozens of children laughing from every direction at once. Ethan turned to leave, and froze. Standing at the end of the hall, just beyond the reach of his flashlight, was a figure. Small, child size, completely still. He raised the beam, but when the light hit the figure, it vanished like smoke. Behind him, something brushed his jacket. He whipped around. Nothing. Only the whisper. "You're getting closer." Ethan sprinted back toward the stairwell, his boots slamming against the tiles. But no matter how far he ran, every hallway looked the same. Every turn brought him back to the door without a number, the one that had burned him earlier. Waiting, patient, hungry, Ethan clutched the letter from his pocket, the one that had brought him here. Under the flashlight, a second line of text shimmered faintly beneath the original, as if only now revealing itself. "You can't leave until you find her." Ethan leaned against the wall, gasping. His breath came out in ragged plumes of mist. The hospital's silence pressed against his eardrums like deep water. Even the whispers had gone still, as if the building itself was holding his breath. He wiped sweat from his brow, his hand shaking. "Get it together, Ethan. It's just a building. It's just an old damn building." But he knew it wasn't true. Not anymore. The letter crumpled in his pocket. He pulled it out again. This time, under the harsh beam of his flashlight, the second message shone clearer. "You can't leave until you find her." The ink looked wet, as if it had just been written. He jammed the letter back into his pocket and pressed forward, deeper into the maze of Saint Elora. After what felt like hours of wandering endless corridors, Ethan found himself at a set of heavy double doors. Above them, barely clinging to the wall, was a rusted sign, "Pediatric Ward." His stomach twisted. The metal doors creaked as he pushed through. The hallway beyond was worse than anything he had seen so far. Walls scorched black from fire, tiles melted into twisted, bubbled shapes. Crumpled gurneys, tiny hospital beds charred to skeletal frames. And amidst it all, scattered like forgotten toys, were personal items. A teddy bear with one eye burned away. A plastic truck melted into the floor. A child's sneaker, still laced, covered in soot. Ethan's heart broke a little at the sight. These weren't just a tragedy. They were a graveyard. He moved slowly, carefully, each footstep sounding impossibly loud. At the end of the corridor, a door waited. This one was different. Pristine, unburned. A small brass plate gleamed under the flashlight. Room 413. The handle was ice cold. It burned his palm, but this time Ethan didn't pull away. He turned it slowly. The door swung open with a sigh. Inside was darkness. A suffocating, liquid darkness that seemed to spill out into the hallway. He stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. Ethan whirled around, fumbling for the handle, but it was gone. The door was gone. Only a blank, unbroken wall remained. Panic surged up his throat, but he forced it down. He raised his flashlight. The beam barely penetrated the gloom, but he could make out the shape of the room. A single hospital bed. Sheets tattered and gray with ash. A small metal chair by the bed facing the corner. Pinned above the bed was a photograph. Ethan stepped closer. It showed a little girl, maybe 6 years old, sitting stiffly on the hospital bed. She had thin blonde hair, huge dark eyes, and a solemn expression. Underneath, written in faded ink, "Lily Carter." Suddenly, the flashlight flickered. The room shuddered. Walls seemed to ripple like water. A whisper crawled through the air, so close Ethan could almost feel lips against his ear. "You found me." The photograph moved sliding down the wall without anyone touching it. The bed sheet stirred, though there was no breeze. From the far corner, something shifted. Slowly, Ethan turned the flashlight. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a figure, a child-sized silhouette, crouched low, facing the corner. Long, brittle hair, a hospital gown hanging in tatters, skin blistered and cracked like burnt porcelain. The figure began to hum. A lullaby. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Ethan's throat closed. The figure twitched, violently, bones cracking. It began to turn toward him. "Don't look." His mind screamed, "Don't you dare look." But he couldn't help it. The figure completed its turn, and Ethan saw her face. One eye completely blackened. Mouth stitched shut with black thread. Tears of blood streaking down her ruined cheeks. She smiled, and the lights went out. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor of room 413. The flashlight flickered weakly beside him. Its battery was dying, or maybe the darkness here was just too thick to fight. For a moment, he couldn't move. His limbs felt numb, heavy, like he'd been underwater for hours. All he could hear was a lullaby, still whispering from somewhere unseen. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." But slower now, broken, like a record player winding down to death. Finally, he forced himself upright. The room was empty. No Lily. No figure in the corner. Only the photo still pinned to the wall, swaying slightly as if someone had just touched it. Ethan stumbled to the door. This time, it opened without a fight. The hallway beyond was different. No burned walls, no melted tiles. Instead, the pediatric ward looked almost new, as if he had stepped back in time. Bright fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Clipboards hung neatly outside every door. Children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere down the hall. For a second, Ethan thought he was dreaming or hallucinating. Then he saw it. A small recording device, an old reel-to-reel tape recorder sitting atop a nurse's desk. The reel spun slowly, though no one was there to press play. Ethan approached cautiously. The label on the tape read, "Session 413, Dr. Brooks. Subject, Lily Carter." His stomach twisted again. His father and Lily. He pressed the play button. At first, only static. Then, a man's voice crackled through the speaker. "This is Dr. Jonathan Brooks. Session number 413. Subject, Lily Carter, age 6. Diagnosis, terminal lymphoma. Experimental protocol proceeding." A long pause. The scrape of a chair being moved. Then, a child's voice, barely above a whisper. "It hurts, doctor. I don't want to anymore." Another pause. Dr. Brooks again, voice clipped, clinical. "Progress requires sacrifice, Lily. You want to get better, don't you?" The girl whimpered. "Can I go home?" Dr. Brooks sighed, as if speaking to a stubborn pet. "Not yet." The tape crackled louder, the background noise swelling into a roar. And beneath it, Ethan heard something else. A second voice. Not the doctor. Not Lily. Something low. Something wrong. It whispered, almost gleefully, "Stay with us, Ethan." The recorder shut off by itself. The reel spun faster, faster, until the machine rattled violently on the desk. Ethan backed away just as the machine exploded, spewing tape and shards of plastic across the floor. He turned to run, but the hallway was gone. In its place stretched an endless corridor, walls blackened and slick with moisture. Doors lined either side, but none had handles. All were slightly ajar, and from each leaked faint whispers, weeping, scratching. Somewhere far ahead, a light flickered. Ethan had no choice. He ran toward it. As he moved, the whispers grew louder. "Don't leave us. Stay here forever. You belong to us now." And in between the voices, Ethan heard laughter. Small, cruel, childish. The kind of laughter that didn't come from any living child. He stumbled through the darkness, lungs burning. Finally, the hallway opened into a wide room. And there, at the center, was another tape recorder. Newer, shining, as if it had just been placed there. A note lay beside it, scrawled in the same frantic handwriting as the letter, "Play me." Ethan hesitated, every fiber of his being screamed to turn and run. But he knew running wouldn't help. Not here. Not anymore. Hands trembling, he pressed play. A chorus of voices erupted from the recorder. Children's screams, pleading, begging, and one voice rising above the others, Lily's Auntie section. "Help me, Ethan. Don't leave me here. I'm still waiting in room 413. The tape ended with a sharp click. Then silence. But not the comforting kind. The oppressive, suffocating silence of being watched. Ethan turned around and saw them, a dozen children, standing in the shadows around him. Faces burned, stitched, broken. Eyes hollow, mouths sewn shut or gaping in silent screams. They stared at him, unmoving, waiting. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Only a thick, choking smoke that filled his lungs, his eyes, his mind, and everything went black. When Ethan came to, he was lying on cold tile. The flashlight was gone. The tape recorder was gone. The children were gone. For a moment, he dared to believe it was over. That maybe he'd fainted, hallucinated everything, and he'd wake up somewhere normal. Maybe even in his Jeep, parked safely outside Saint Elora's rusted gates. But when he sat up, he knew the truth. He was still inside. And now, it was worse. The hospital around him had changed. The walls bled black tar. Ceiling tiles hung down like sagging, rotten flesh. The overhead lights flickered erratically, casting shadows that twitched and crawled along the floor. Something deep inside him whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." Ethan pulled himself to his feet. His legs were weak, rubbery, but he moved forward. The hallways twisted in on themselves, no longer following any logical layout. Doors opened into brick walls. Staircases led to ceilings. Corridors looped back to the same burned paintings, the same scorched medical charts, again and again. Saint Elora wasn't just a place anymore. It was alive. And it was angry. As he staggered through the impossible maze, Ethan began to see things. Visions, memories. He passed a hospital room where a little boy lay shrieking as dark-clad doctors forced a needle the size of a knitting needle into his arm. Past a nursery where cribs burned, the cries of infants piercing the smoke. He knew somehow that these were real. Fragments of the hospital's history. moments of suffering etched into the walls like scars. And through it all, the same name kept surfacing: Dr. Jonathan Brooks, his father. At last, he found another door. Unlike the others, this one wasn't scorched or broken. It was a pristine wooden door, polished with a brass plaque, administrative records. Something told him he had to go inside. The handle turned easily. The room was small. A desk, a filing cabinet, dust hanging thick in the air, swirling like tiny ghosts. On the desk sat a single thick folder, so new it seemed out of place in the decay. Scrawled across it in red ink, Project Lyra. Ethan opened it with trembling hands. Inside were medical reports, photographs, charts, all documenting unauthorized experimental treatments performed on terminal pediatric patients. Painful, invasive procedures, experimental drug tests, unapproved surgeries. Each file bore the same authorization. Signed, Dr. Jonathan Brooks. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he flipped through page after page. One file stopped him cold. Patient number 013, Lily Carter. Diagnosis: terminal lymphoma. Consent: forged. Beneath it, a handwritten note. Subject failed to respond to prototype 9 serum. Recommend disposal to prevent media attention. Recommend disposal. They hadn't just experimented on Lily. They had killed her to cover it up. His father had killed her. Ethan dropped the folder, disgust and horror twisting inside him. He staggered back, nearly tripping over a fallen chair. A voice spoke from the shadows behind him. "You know now." He spun around. Standing there, half in darkness, was the girl, Lily. Her form flickered like a bad television sing-along moment, a healthy child, the next a burned husk with weeping wounds. She pointed at him with one skeletal finger. "You share his blood. You owe us." The walls around him pulsed. Bleeding words. Murderer. Thief. Liar. Ethan backed against the desk, heart hammering. "I didn't do this," he gasped. "It wasn't me." But Lily only smiled. A terrible, broken thing. Blood calls to blood. She stepped closer. Ethan turned and fled. He didn't know how long he ran. The hallways blurred into a dizzying spiral of smoke and screaming. No matter where he went, he found no doors, no exits. Only the hospital stretching on forever. And somewhere behind him, always just out of sight, Lily followed. Humming, waiting. Finally, he collapsed against a wall, sliding down to the filthy floor. He couldn't do it. He couldn't outrun this. He couldn't change what had been done. But maybe he could make it right. He reached into his jacket, fingers brushing against something cold. The letter, crumpled, torn, but still there. He unfolded it one last time. Underneath the second hidden line, new words had appeared. Room 413 ended where it began. The walls closed in around Ethan as he stumbled through the endless hallways. Every direction he turned, room 413 seemed to loom ahead of him, always the same pristine door, gleaming in the unnatural light, waiting. He didn't remember climbing stairs, yet somehow he was higher now. The air grew colder, thicker, every breath dragging knives through his chest. From somewhere unseen, the children whispered, "One more chance. One last game. Win and you go free." Lose and stay forever. The words tangled and wrapped around him like invisible chains. When he finally reached room 413 again, the door was ajar. Waiting, inviting, Ethan hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The room was no longer empty. It was the child's hospital room, untouched by fire or decay. The bed was neatly made. The walls were pale blue, decorated with painted clouds. A mobile of paper stars hung from the ceiling, spinning lazily. In the center of the room stood a circle of children, 12 of them, all different, some burned, some stitched, some with missing limbs, others with hollow eyes. And in the center of them, standing perfectly still, was Lily. Her hospital gown was pristine, her blonde hair combed neatly, but her eyes, those bottomless, broken eyes, never left Ethan's aside. On the floor before her sat an old toy, a worn Jack-in-the-Box. Lily spoke, voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "We play now." The other children chanted softly, their voices weaving a hypnotic rhythm. "Turn the handle, face the tune, win your prize, or stay soon." Ethan's heart thudded painfully in his chest. "What happens if I lose?" he asked hoarsely. Lily smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You become one of us." She gestured toward the Jack-in-the-Box. "Turn it 3 times. Just 3. He knelt slowly, the Jack-in-the-Box creaking under his trembling fingers. The metal was icy to the touch. He closed his eyes, started to turn the crank. 1. The tinny melody filled the Ruma warped, broken version of Pop Goes the Weasel. The children giggled. The air grew heavier, pressing against his skin like invisible hands. 2. The mobile overhead spun faster. The painted stars blurred into streaks of white and blue. The walls of the room rippled like disturbed water. He hesitated. The crank jerked in his hand, pulling itself forward. Ethan bit down a scream. He gritted his teeth and turned it again. 3. The music stopped. Silence fell. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a hideous creak, the lid of the Jack-in-the-Box sprung open. But instead of a clown, a blackened, skeletal hand shot out, grabbing Ethan's wrist. Pain lanced through him. The children laughed not with joy, but with a twisted, delighted cruelty. Lily stepped forward, her voice a razor across his skin. "You lose." Ethan yanked free, falling backward onto the floor. The room around him shifted violently, walls melting, ceiling cracking open to reveal a sky of swirling black smoke. The children moved closer, their faces warping, mouths opening far too wide, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. "Stay with us. Play forever. Be our brother." Ethan scrambled to his feet. He had to fight, had to end this. He remembered the folder. The truth? If Saint Elora fed on guilt, on lies, maybe truth was the weapon. He ripped the letter from his pocket, the one that had summoned him here, and screamed, "My father killed you. He lied. He betrayed you. But I am not him." The room shuddered. The children shrieked, recoiling. The blackened hand withdrew back into the Jack-in-the-Box, slamming the lid shut with a final deafening clang. Lily's smile faltered. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Small, vulnerable. She stepped back toward the bed, voice a broken whisper. "Will you stay with me?" Ethan's heart broke for her. For all of them. "I can't stay," he said softly. but I won't forget you." He turned away. And for the first time since he entered Saint Elora, the door opened by itself. As he crossed the threshold, the whispers faded behind him. The children's faces blurred into mist. The walls crumbled into ash. And Saint Elora let him go. Ethan stumbled down the hallway, his legs barely carrying him. Saint Elora was coming apart. The once solid walls crumbled into blackened ash, drifting through the air like snow. Ceiling tiles cracked and fell. Doors swung wildly on broken hinges, slamming shut with deafening bangs. Behind him, the children's whispers faded into nothing. Ahead, the hospital stretched endlessly, bathed in a red, pulsing light like a heartbeat. Ethan pushed forward, each step a war against the pull trying to drag him back. The building didn't want to let him go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As he turned another corner, he saw it. The main atrium, or what was left of it. The large glass dome overhead had shattered, letting in the endless black sky beyond. The ground was cracked, and from those cracks seeped a thick, tar-like mist. In the center of the atrium stood a figure, tall, draped in a blackened, rotted doctor's coat. The stethoscope around its neck swung lazily with each invisible breeze. Ethan knew immediately who it was. Dr. Jonathan Brooks, his father, or what was left of him. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face both familiar and monstrous. Parts of it were burned away. Where the eyes should have been, only deep smoking holes remained. Yet Ethan felt the gaze piercing, accusing. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the figure spoke, voice hollow and dripping with contempt. "My blood, my sin, my legacy." It stretched out one hand. In its palm lay a scalpel, rusted, bloody, an offer, a choice. Ethan's mind reeled. The hospital had been a tomb, a crime scene, a monument to suffering built on the lies and ambition of men like Jonathan Brooks. And now Saint Elora demanded payment. Either Ethan accepted the scalpel became part of the legacy, part of the cycle, or he would be swallowed whole by it, lose himself, become another whisper in the walls. The building trembled violently. Chunks of ceiling rained down. The mist rose higher, now licking at his ankles, dragging at his clothes. The figure waited, silent and patient. The scalpel gleamed dully in the red light. Ethan stepped forward. For a heartbeat, he thought about taking it, giving up, letting the guilt and bloodline consume him. But then he thought of Lily, of all the other children, of himself trapped in this endless nightmare, never forgiven, never freed. Number, not like this. With every ounce of strength he had left, Ethan shook his head. Number, I am not you. Your sins die with you. The figure's face twisted into a snarl. The mist rose higher, choking. The walls cracked. The atrium floor split wide open, revealing a yawning black chasm. Without warning, the figure lunged, scalpel slashing. Ethan dodged, adrenaline surging. He sprinted toward the cracked floor, toward the chasm. Toward the end, the ground crumbled under his feet. He fell, not into darkness, but into light, white, blinding white, warm and clean. He gasped, blinking against it. Slowly, shapes formed around him, sunlight filtering through trees. The smell of wet grass, birdsong. He was outside, in the field behind Saint Elora, alive. He collapsed onto his back, staring up at the endless blue sky. It was over. Somehow, impossibly, it was over. He had escaped, but now without scars. He could still hear the faintest echoes, laughter, whispers carried on the wind. Saint Elora might have let him go, but it would never truly leave him. In the distance, the ruins of the hospital smoldered gently, as if exhaling their last breath. Ash floated into the sky, twisting into shapes. Ethan thought he recognized small figures, waving, and then they were gone. At peace. At last. For days after escaping St. Elora, Ethan barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back there, running through endless halls, hearing the children's laughter echoing off the burning walls. The doctors, the screams, the scalpel. He would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, the smell of smoke still clinging to him. Even in the waking world, shadows clung to the edges of his vision. Faint whispers tugged at the corners of his hearing. He told himself it was trauma, guilt, memory. He told himself St. Elora was gone, that it couldn't touch him anymore. He was wrong. One evening, a week after the escape, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table of his tiny apartment. The television flickered in the background static and muted news reports about the ruins of Saint Elora finally being demolished for good. He barely listened. In front of him lay the letter, the one that had started it all. Its edges were worn and torn from how many times he had unfolded and refolded it. But tonight, something was different. A new line of text had appeared at the bottom, written in the same trembling hand. Thank you, but you're not done yet. A chill swept through the room. The lights flickered. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the letter. In the TV's reflection, he saw it. A figure standing behind him, small, child-sized, blonde hair, dark, empty eyes. Lily. She smiled a soft, sad smile, then lifted one hand, waved, slowly, patiently, stay with me. The words weren't spoken aloud. They bloomed inside his mind like a blooming bruise. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to run, but he knew it wouldn't matter. You didn't escape Saint Elora. Not truly. You carried it inside you. Forever. The television snapped off. The apartment plunged into darkness. Somewhere in that darkness, tiny bare feet padded softly across the floor. Coming closer, Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't move. He simply whispered, "I'm sorry." And the darkness took him. They say if you drive past the spot where St. Elora once stood, if you stop and roll down your window, you might hear it, a child's laughter, a voice, soft and broken. Stay with me. And if you're not careful, you just might